we were both living in Maine, and at the time we made Night Labor, and we had originally met Sherman's father, who we were filming for over the course of time, and we showed up to Sherman's father's house, and then Sherman came outside, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And we said, "Oh, we're here to make a movie on your dad." And he goes, "Well, I'm Sherman Frank Jr." And we both looked at him and said, "Wow, do you want to be in the movie too?" And he said, "Sure, why not?" And then he just had such a stunning face that he ended up being the movie. He himself holds the entire movie. I think he is both performing, but forgets that he's performing. He gets caught up in his routine so much that he realizes that the routines themselves are also performances. So we had extensive conversations about situations. So there's a lot of situations that we wanted to capture and arrange. But at the same time, we let those situations fall apart to see what was going to happen. So when he was cutting the heads off of fish, we didn't know what he was going to talk about or what he was going to do. This is something that came strictly from him.
Well, I think we're stepping away from a typical narrative. We're stepping away from conventions, and in the same regard, though, we're using those conventions and then changing them a little bit. And I think the idea of having the most minimal amount of dialogue, and it's all sort of observational, and it's part of the everyday and mundane. I think those things are what interest us right now. That sort of almost like uber observation, like just sitting yourself and watching someone cut something for hours and hours, and then you take maybe parts of that, and as an audience maybe that feels long, but you could imagine he does that for hours and hours and hours. So it's sort of, I don't know if I'm saying this right, it's almost like I don't know, like just an exercise in watching and looking. I think that's something that really interests us now. No, I think we watch a lot of the films that come out of the sensory ethnography lab, and I think the overlap is that sort of different way of watching and looking, and observing the world, the sort of mundane world around you, and perceiving it in a different way from the film. So your senses are engaged, your way of looking is maybe changed. So I think there's definitely overlaps, but I think for us, or at least for me, and I don't know about you, David, but I find that what I'm interested in is sort of more the sort of construction and that relationship, and talking in advance to the people that you're filming, and maybe like setting up the scenario and then what comes out of that scenario, which I don't consider that to be ethnography in the same way. I mean, it'd be interesting, what people in the lab, if they would consider that kind of thing sensory ethnography, but I don't know. For me, it's more about that performance that's interesting, and what comes out of that, because it's sort of, you throw something into the mix and then you have no idea what to expect. That gray zone, I think, is really interesting.
The Night Labor is also about the cinema of everyday life, and basically the arc is, it starts in the daytime, it gradually moves to the nighttime, and it finally moves to the next morning, and that's it. So it's about capturing an experience. That's it. It teases out an entire experience over the course of an evening to a morning, but it doesn't do any of the conventional plots where characters encounter each other to create conflict. It's one person just having an experience. And what does it mean to have an experience? How does it feel to work alone? What are the sounds that surround the people or that person in that factory? And how do those two cooperate with each other? How does Sherman's face also begin to resemble these items that are about to be butchered at night? They all have overlapping features with each other. And that was just sort of something that we noticed during the patterns of images and sounds that we were able to collect and gather, and then assemble. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the point. Is not to make any sense.
Halfway, halfway